Hi there, this is Sandra from the Schwowin's Nest. Welcome to my Holly Jolly Christmas series. Being a crafter, I save everything. This is a lid from a canister that I redid last year. I'm going to use some crud cutter and just clean it up really good before I start painting it. It's already got this little lip on the inside, so I thought that would be a perfect little frame. I'm going to give the inside square a couple of coats of DIY chalk paint. I have this stencil of a Christmas tree, and I thought I'm going to do something a little different. I didn't want this Christmas tree to be a solid black, so I'm just going to tape it down, and what I'm going to do is dry brush it. The technique I use is to dip my brush into a little bit of paint and then dab off as much excess as I need, usually quite a bit. I usually start on the lighter side and then I add more paint as I need. What I'm doing is just going back and forth, making sure that I hold the edges of the stencil down nice and tight so my brush doesn't go underneath and bleed through. This is turning out amazing. I love the texture of it. I love how it looks. It's getting some of the lines from the white paint underneath, and it turns out amazing. For a finishing touch, I'm just taking my dry brush and going all the way around the edges, a little bit extra in the corners to make it look more distressed and worn. The second little mini sign that I'm going to make is just using this little piece of scrap wood. I'm just going to give the top of it a couple of coats of the white paint. I have this reindeer printout that I used on a different project. It's still got the pencil marks on the back, which is how I transferred it before, and I'm going to do the same thing now. So I'll just use my pen and trace it out really nice and firm so I get that pencil mark on the white paint. Using my black oil-based Craft Smart paint pen, I'm going to fill in the reindeer, but I'm going to skip his antlers. When I'm coloring, I always like to do an outline first and then fill in after. I thought I would add a little bit of Christmas cheer for this reindeer, so I'm using some of this Deco Art Chalky Finish paint in the color Romance, and I'm also going to mix a little bit of black in there just to get a nice deeper red color. Using a fine tip artist paintbrush, I'm going to just fill in the antlers. To make the reindeer look a little bit more distressed, I'm just going to take a tiny little dry brush and do some stippling, so some pouncing up and down, just to give it a little bit more of a worn look. This third project is using this printout of buffalo check paper, and I will put the link to where I purchased this. This was an Etsy digital download, and I've also got this black arrow, and I'm not sure if I got this at the Dollar Tree or at Dollarama, but what I'm going to do is cover the arrow part with the buffalo check paper. I like using my scrapbook cutter for long cuts like this, but you can also just use scissors. Here I'm just going to use a pencil to trace out the arrow portion. I'm going to use Mod Podge to attach the paper to the arrow, but what I'm going to do is use some water in a spray bottle and mist the back of the paper. That's going to give me a lot more working time. If I put the paper on dry, it's going to stick and I won't be able to move or adjust it. This method also prevents more air bubbles from getting in because the paper and the glue are both wet and you can smooth them out really nicely together. Using some little bits of scrap wood that I have, and these are little garden stakes, but you can also use jumbo popsicle sticks for this. I've cut them down into all of the pieces to fit all the way around the arrow. So I'm going to just start with my hot glue and start putting everything together. Once I have everything assembled, I'm going to give the exterior and interior of the house part a coat of black paint, but the roof is going to get some gray paint. You'll notice at the bottom here that I have these little wood cubes glued to the back of the house, and that's just to give it a little bit of extra stability so it doesn't tip over. I'm using Country Gray from Rust-Oleum for the roof. Using my dry brush technique, I am just going to do a little bit of distressing on the roof just to make it look a little bit more weathered. I wanted this little house to look like the exterior of a home, so I'm taking a couple of pieces of greenery from a wreath and I'm just going to twist them together and make a little wreath out of them. And to make it look a little bit more high end, I'm going to actually do some trimming of the branches so they don't look quite so fluffy. So in true Sandra fashion, I have some footage that is missing. And as I was doing this, I was watching a video and didn't notice the ding when my memory card said, I'm full and I can't record anymore. So I missed out being able to show you how I created the little wreath and the little Christmas trees that you can see there. But I will explain those in a bit. Here I'm using some regular size popsicle sticks and I'm trimming them to make a little window. And these miter shears are the best invention ever. They're also the best tool for me because I have really bad arthritis in my wrists, and this makes it super easy to be able to cut things down. So I will have this listed down in my description box if you're interested in purchasing one of these. The window is just going to be a little simple rustic window with 4 panes on it, and I'm just using hot glue to put it all together. Here's the finished little window, really simple to make. I'm going to cover it with some Rust-Oleum Country Gray chalk paint, and then I'm going to attach it to my little house. I also decided to give it just a little bit of dry brushing with some black to make it old and rustic. Here's where I can explain to you what I did with the decor for this little house. Here's the little wreath. I just trimmed it down and I added a couple of little pine cones and some little red pip berries. The trees at the bottom came from the Dollar Tree and I just trimmed off the white snow mound at the bottom. I really don't like that. I also trimmed one of the trees a little bit shorter. I added some pip berries just with some hot glue and a couple of jingle bells for the top of the trees and some pine cones at the bottom. With the window glued on, it didn't look right to have that buffalo check paper sticking out from underneath, so I just filled in the window with some white paint. My next project is using this Market Fresh Eggs sign, which doesn't do well in my area. For some reason, there aren't a lot of farmhouse people here. So what I'm doing is just taking some sandpaper and sanding down the letters and the chicken just to get rid of that raised finish. Then just to cover up any imperfections, I gave it a coat of black chalk paint, and now I'm going over it with a couple coats of white chalk paint. I'm leaving the frame around the edge the way it is because it's really nicely distressed, and it's one step that I don't have to do again. I really loved the way I dry brushed that first tree in the first project of this video, so I decided to do the same thing for this one. But what I'm doing is I'm going to make this tree just a little bit bigger. So I've taped off the little stump down at the bottom, and I'm going to center it at the very top and start dry brushing this part of the tree. What I've done now is just moved the stencil down and to the left a little bit to make the bottom part of a larger tree, and I'll repeat the process on the right hand side. This is going to give me a much larger tree. Since some of the areas at the bottom got a little darker, I'm just taking a smaller brush and just adding in some darker segments to the top too. Then I'm just adding a little hand painted tree trunk. There's a bunch of white space on this sign, so I am going to be putting some letters in, and this is a brand new stencil that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. I actually grabbed 4 or 5 different designs, and I really like these because they're nice and thick. I will be cutting them into strips just so they're easier to work with, and then I'm going to stencil in some letters. These letter stencils are just fitting in between those 2 ridges, so I didn't want to take the chance of making a mess with my makeup sponge and the paint and stenciling them. Instead, I'm using my pencil and I'll trace them out and then fill them in with a marker. So I'm putting Farm Fresh Christmas trees, and this is the marker that I love to use. It's a scrapbook marker. I've had it for ages. It still works really well. The one thing I have to remember about this though is that it smudges. So I'm going to be very, very careful to not smudge any of this lettering because I don't want it to look that distressed. I wanted that frame of the Christmas tree to pop, so I'm just using a little bit of black and I'm just going very gently around the edge to distress it and make the frame stand out more. I wanted to dress this up a little bit with some greenery, so I've got these little stems that I picked up from Amazon. I'll have a link to that down in the description box. I actually found these from DIY Beauty on Purpose, Leah Knepp, and they are just beautiful, and they come in a huge pack. I think you get like 100 pieces for $14. So I'm going to just take some hot glue and glue those to the very top of the sign. I'm also adding a little bit of holly, and I'm using my Dollar Tree makeup applicator, which is a silicone little paddle, to hold down the hot glue so I don't burn my fingers. Those little fingertip protectors are a little too small for my fat, chubby fingers, so this works out really well for me. This is a tip that I picked up from Holly over at Hot Humble Pie. I'm also going to just add a few of these berries. This last sign is also something that I'm redoing. This one had a little greenery wreath on it, but I decided to remove that wreath and write in the word Merry. Now, I tend to start from the end of the word and work my way backwards, and I'm just freehanding this with my Craft Smart paint pen. And I'm just going to go ahead and add all of the letters in, and then I'll embellish them a little bit. Now that I have the letters down, I'm going to just go over them with my paint pen, but on every stroke that goes down, I'm going to make that thicker. And then the upstrokes will be still thinner, but the downstrokes will be thicker. So that's how I get my letters to look more high end. The other thing that I like to do on some of my letters is to make a little shadow mark. So I'm just using my favorite scrapbook marker, and I'm going to go on the left side of each of the lines, not all of the lines, but some of them. And I'm just going to go ahead and create a bit of a shadow so it looks more like it was stenciled on. I have some cute little holly leaves that I'm using that I picked up from Dollarama, but they had those little red plastic berries. I didn't like that, so I'm going to just pull those off, trim off the ends a little bit, and then I'll probably be adding some of the other red pip berries that I like so much. I'm going to be starting in the corner here and put some greenery going down and then some going across. I like sometimes to make things a little off center so it's not just looking so normal. I'm also going to add some of the pip berries in and hot glue everything into place. I've got the pip berries glued in, and I'm just going to add a couple of little pine cones up in the corner. To make this look a little bit more high end, I'm just going to add some holly and a pine cone into the bottom right corner, and then I'm just going to distress the edges a little bit of the frame. I'm also going to dry brush a little bit on the inside of it where the shiplap lines are, and just to give it a worn and rustic look. I hope you enjoyed these 5 easy signs, and I hope you get inspired to create some of your own. If you like this kind of content, I would love for you to stick around a while. Hit that subscribe button. Those 2 black arrows will show you exactly where to click. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your support. Bye for now.